Another round of locals in front of us here. We're playing Nami again, and today we're up against the Enel matchup, one that I think can actually get really tricky, especially with the Ohm into Holly interaction. Just putting two bodies for such little Dawn onto the board can be really tricky for Nami to deal with early on. But if you have the tools to just kind of deal with those low swings, you might be able to swing back and actually deal with those cards rather well in terms of combat. The deck doesn't draw too well, so especially late game, if they don't go too big, it might pan out. Let's see how the games go. Enjoy. We're counting out our life after a quick mulligan here. We didn't have the hands we wanted to keep, but alas, we are doing good stuff here. I like the fact that I have the Gavel. They go 1 Dawn pass. I go to 2, and just in case they go like all swing, I like having that protection. So Buggy's going to help me thin out a little bit here. I find myself an Impel down, accidentally messing with all my cards here. And I'm going to kind of rearrange a little bit. And I know now a Pilaf and a Kaya is right at the bottom. So right at the end there, I know pretty much that end game is relatively set up for me. If I can get to that point, I'm going to be able to win, have that draw pressure. So it's going to be building towards that. Now they're going to swing 5k. I'm going to kind of rearrange the top 3 cards, and I'm going to try and draw into the rubber band so that I can then work that way. So at this point, I'm going to untap, draw out, and kind of go to 4 Dawn here. I drew actually the Deathwing here. Ultimately decided that kind of bigger draw is going to be important here, and I can mill those 2 cards over and thin out my deck into some aggressive draws. So the Gavel is going to mill over the Spada and the rubber band that I put up top. Katakuri is going to rearrange, so they accidentally flip over the life that I had. So mistake there, it's fine, it's at locals. Overheat's going to be at the bottom. Regardless though, I know that it's going to be a card that they generally don't want me to see at all, so that's going to be good to know later in the game. Katakuri swings, Charlotte kind of swings at me here. I Gavel and kind of pitch down here those 2 cards. Enel swings 6k at me, and I'm going to have to take it. Zeff goes to my hand. That's an unfortunate hit there, and I will say one that could have been mitigated by honestly just taking the rubber band, but I still think taking the Deathwink would have been fine here. I'm going to recur the 1-cost card, and honestly my hand's not that bad. Unfortunately, the Charlotte is a 4-cost, so I'm not really going to be able to bounce that. So I'm just thinking about how I want to use my Dawn here, and what I'm going to decide to do, shift over my life a little bit. I'm going to swing 7k at the Katakuri, so the Charlotte here, and they're gonna counter out once, and that's fine. I just need to get cards out of their hand, right? I just need to get potential threats later on so that I can swing more efficiently. They're gonna then swing 7k at me. I'm then gonna Gavel again. Gavel pitch the Impel down, mill over 2 cards. We're doing stuff and things here. We're making things work. They're gonna swing 7k at lead. I'm gonna redraw with the Mellow. Drawing into an Impel down is not great in this situation. Definitely one of my bigger stumbles here, and definitely making me regret grabbing that the Deathwing. But they go into one of the more frustrating interactions that I was talking about at the beginning of the video, Ohm into Holly. Just the board's like really big. They're not playing 1 threat at a time. These are the type of situations where the Sakazuki matchup is actually a lot easier. They will legitimately play 1 threat at a time and while clearing out my board. But stuff like this is why NL can be a little hard. So we draw some cards here, and we're really thinking about how we want to deal with this board. Do we want to kind of attack some things, force some cards out of their hand? Do I want to play the Zeff to just bounce the dog to prevent a threat that way? I don't really know how I want to kind of orient this matchup here. So at this point, ultimately, I decide to tap 5, play out the Zeff, and bounce the dog. And I think that's the way to do it here, in my opinion. So I'm going to mill over 2 cards that I'm not really looking forward to using here. And one thing that I messed up with here is I honestly could have just swung more here. I could have just used, they managed to also top deck the removal onto the Zeff, which is absolutely insane. They admitted they fully top decked it. Absolutely insane. That was probably their saving grace as well. If that Zeff was allowed to untap freely, I know this is a deck that I can generally beat on the counter, kind of back and forth, and Deathlink would have been able to save Zeff too. So if I was able to untap twice, mill 7, it would have been insane. Now, they're looking through their deck, they're grabbing some stuff. I likely would have been able to swing at least into the Katakuri, at least for 6k to get a card out of their hand. That's what I should have done last turn. So that, I will admit, is another mistake on my part. Now, I'm going to overheat the 6k swing. I'm going to overheat, and I mean, everything's a 1k here. It's really just depending on if I am able to save the 1k, what am I looking to save? I'm going to return the Mr. 1. They're going to swing 5k, and it doesn't look like, you know, I'm really going to be able to save that. So I'm going to take the hit. Unfortunately, my triggers are also pretty garbage here. Buggy trigger, Zeff trigger originally. Not even drawing any cards. That's really what I'm looking to do. Now, leader's going to hit. I'm going to kind of take 2 cards there, and we're going to let them go. Now, arguably, I don't need to be taking a lot of these hits. Leader did only swing for 6. I have 2 to counter out, but I just figured these resources would be more important to me kind of later on. I drew in a Nojiko here, and honestly, that 1 extra swing may end up mattering here. Let's see where we end up. Now, we do have like a pretty good stack of cards in our hand here. We're gonna Mr. 1 and grab ourselves a Gavel, and we are then going to go to our turn, and we are going to then play out a Nojiko, because we got to do some bouncing. We got to get rid of some cards here. Honestly, I should have swung first. This is a sequencing thing that I always tend to like misplay here, but we're gonna bounce the dog. Just kind of keep that out of their hand, or so I kind of keep that out. There's nothing else I really want to bounce. Category comes back in with like haste, really. Well, in this case, it doesn't, because I don't have less, but I don't want them really manipulating my life if I don't have to. And honestly, at this point, I should be swinging more, but I do have a bunch of cards to play out. I could have gone like a free 5k swing, and this is kind of the stuff that I'm forgetting here. I'm just letting the NL player get into my head. I'm too worried about the board. That's really what this comes down to. I'm too worried about the board. I'm milling out some cards. I could be getting out more cards in their hand, which could matter later on. I could attach more Dawn to my Buggies to attack in, get more successful 5k swings in, but I'm milling out, and we're going to Deathwing to draw 2 more cards. We're going to be able to counter out really everything that they're throwing at us here. Category is not going to have the haste here. They're going to bottom that top card. So now I know, thanks to that mistake they made in the beginning, Overheat's at the top. The card that I'm seeing there is not something they want me to get. So I'm thinking like, okay, it's probably going to be that draw, right? It's probably going to be that that draw ability. I'm just making sure, like, why didn't the category hit at me? And I'm like, okay, yeah, the clause is less life in order to have that rush. So that's perfectly fine. Now, really thinking about how I want to play this. I have a Gavel. I used up my Deathwing, and I have a Nojiko as well. So I'm going to have to start attaching some Dawn, doing some attacks. What do I attack? What do I get in with? And how much Dawn do I save up? This is, again, already 2 kind of situations where I could have gotten some cards out of their hand, and I'm really messing that up already. They do have a Sanji blocker. I'm going to swing 6k Buggy. It's kind of why Buggy is nice, because Buggy's like 2k. It's actually a decent amount that you can attach Dawn to. I'm going to swing 6k. They're going to counter out to 7, and then I'm going to attach 6k. And then swing, or like, well, I do want to attach more here, not just 6. I want them to at least force out a 2k, and then I'm going to swing at the 5k again. Finally, that goes away, but again, they could be at 1 less card in hand right now. They could have been honestly empty-handed. If I was just swinging earlier, I might have been able to deal with their board a little bit better had I been also more aggressive with how I was dealing with my triggers. But ultimately, that's okay. This is a matchup that you can work with. This is why Nami is kind of in the meta. You can make these decisions, and you can counter out pretty well here. And then their category is going to swing. I'm going to then counter out with the Gavel here. And I'm just really thinking about like what's in my yard. What am I thinking about? How I'm going to hit? Because that Overheat is at the top. I know that Overheat's there. So if I take this hit, I can bounce one of their cards here. I could bounce Sanji blocker. I could bounce like, well, I don't really want to bounce the Ohm in this case, but it's actually not that bad. I maybe should have just taken the hit on the first category, bounced the other category. That way I don't have to take a 6k hit. So I'm just going to decide to take it here. I'm going to Overheat. I'm going to bounce the, in this case, the Sanji blocker, because the Ohm is going to just cheat back the dog back into play. If they want to play that, they're going to have to bring that back in, or it might let them go deeper and look for another one. So this case, gonna counter out with the Gavel, and then finally they're gonna hit with lead. I'm gonna see that the peel off is the last trigger. I'm gonna draw 2 cards, and this is where ultimately, like, I could have been at like 1 more life. I think if I swung a bit more aggressively like early on, I could have been a little bit higher. And this is just part of the learning curve of the deck for me, especially just kind of playing in paper. Just a lot more things to track. And at this point, I'm thinking like, can I go for this win? I'm at like 13 cards, right? Like, I'm going to count it out in a sec. I'm at 13 cards, and it's not looking too good to where I want to be. I'm deep in the think tank. When I'm leaning over and I'm thinking like this, I'm deep in the think tank. I do not know how I want to do this. So 13 cards is what I count out. I can't exactly go for a win. How do I counter everything out? And that's what I'm thinking. I'm realizing, okay, I'm asking like, okay, That thing has rush, but again, confirming, speaking out loud, that it's not going to have rush because I have less life than the Enel player. So if they have another copy, it's fine. I'm going to swing 6k at the 5k. I potentially could have just swung more here, but it ends up dying. And then I'm going to attach a bunch of Dawn and try and hit out something else as well. So here, I'm going to attach some Dawn to the Buggy. I probably could have just attached more, honestly. But, you know, 6k is going to go at the other 6k. They're going to counter out with 1 here. And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. I do have, I believe, like 2 cards to cast here, but I could have attached 1 more Dawn here. The reason I don't is because I'm thinking, what if I need to draw into something with a Deathwing to then cast? That is what I'm worried about. So I'm going to Spada, I'm going to rearrange, and then the cards that I see here, I don't necessarily want, which ultimately actually comes down to my mistake here. So I'm going to counter out a 7k attack. I'm going to counter out the 6k attack. I'm going to Deathwing, or sorry, not attack. They're attacking 16k with the Katakuri here. Then I'm going to counter out with the Kaya, and then they swing final, and then that's the GGs. Again, multiple mistakes, but we get there. Enjoy the games.